Hello, this is a listening project specifically highlighting the women's voice within the game, brought to you by the Football Supporters Association and Offside Media Productions. In this 6-part series, leaders of football fan groups and other female trailblazers are joining me, Lynsey Hooper, to chat about the big issues facing fans right now. Today's episode is all about leadership in the game, and joining me for this one is Christine Seddon, Blackpool Supporters Trust board member and FSA National Council member, Sue Watson, chair of West Ham United Supporters Trust, and Hannah Kumari, a Coventry fan and performer, writer, director and producer of football-related work in the arts. So we're going to get stuck in right away. And Christine, you're a woman who's had a big impact on fans changing the leadership in the game. So tell us about your work to help remove the Oyston family from Blackpool Football Club.
Okay, we could be here all day.
We don't have all day, but we're all ears.
I'm a lifelong Blackpool fan, and it's quite well documented that at Blackpool we had really, once we got into the Premier League, and then all the money that came into the club and then disappeared out of the club to the owners, really opened fans' eyes as to what was going on in terms of having rogue owners. So the fans, we started a campaign which ended up lasting almost 5 years, and ended up with the vast majority of fans boycotting every single game for all that time. It was called the Not a Penny More campaign, and we just we were so frustrated because football governance, which is a completely big topic, separate topic really, but we realised that there was just literally no help for us when dealing with rogue owners, and we see football clubs as being ours, as being part of the community. So when they're being literally run into the ground and asset stripped, which is what actually happened, and that's legally documented, so you don't have to panic about being sued about that, because that actually happened. We just felt as supporters that enough was enough, and we had to do something. And when we realised that there was no cavalry coming to our rescue, there was no referee for us, we had to take matters into our own hands. Now, I got involved really from going on to a radio programme where I sort of had a bit of a rant and seemed to resonate. What I was saying resonated with a lot of fans. So the Supporters Trust asked me to get involved initially as a spokesperson. I then ended up on the committee. I became the deputy, and then served as the chair of the trust for 3 years. In that time, I discovered just how poorly the game is governed. It really opened my eyes to so much of the bigger picture, if you like. So I then got involved with the Football Supporters Association, campaigned at Westminster, campaigned at the EFL offices. I've been to many, many meetings with the EFL and the FA about all of these issues. And the fact that I'm female, to be honest, it just didn't come into my head that would ever be an issue. I actually think that in these circumstances, it was quite helpful, because I think people saw a woman, and a middle-aged woman, and weren't really quite sure how to deal with this, because they're used to this image that we have of all football fans being a bit thick, perhaps, possibly a bit violent, a bit aggressive, and mainly male. So to be able to have a platform where I was able to show that actually that is not the case, and I found that people were willing to listen, probably because I was a woman. And also it helped. I felt I was able to bring all the different sides of the fan groups, because all clubs have, I think football supporters, it's a broad church, isn't it? And you've got all sorts of people from all sorts of backgrounds that support football clubs. And we needed our fans to be really united behind this campaign. And sometimes, I think when a game like football is testosterone fueled, you end up with male leaders, and there's always this clashing of antlers, shall we say. And I think being a female at that point helped to avoid a lot of that. So I found that some of the groups that were perhaps a little bit more radical, shall we say, obviously as a trust we were democratic and legal and all the rest of it. Not all football fans are quite as straightforward as a trust is, but I was still able to pull all sides together, and get us to band as one, which was what was very much needed at that time. So it was a privilege to do it, and we did save our football club, and we absolutely had a tremendous victory, which was based on the actions that the fans were taking. So I'm immensely proud of that, and to have been part of that, and also going forward to be able to help other football clubs that are having problems. So as the chair of the trust, as a voice for a campaign, I was given a platform that I perhaps, otherwise I would never have had. And I didn't get into it for that reason. I got into it because I love my club and I just wanted to save it. But having, the genie's out the bottle, and having seen how much there is to do, I can't unsee that now. So, for me, my work goes on through the FSA, through the Supporters Trust Board as well.
I imagine you are not the only, what I'm going to brand, accidental women's leader in football. You got into it purely by accident. I imagine that's the case for a few. I still feel it's stark. We don't see or hear from many women leaders. The fact that we can probably all name them as well means that there's a glaring problem. Sue, bringing you in from the West Ham Supporters Trust point of view, I'm going to focus on your club for a second. Karen Brady, CEO, so we've got a very visual leader there. Mm-hmm. And then Nicole Farley is the club's first female coach. I think she's the coach of the academy. Mm-hmm. But the fact, again, that we can just pinpoint who these are means that there's not enough.
Yes, that's true. Just to add to that, a lot of the heads of various departments within the club are women.
Okay.
So things like ticketing, supporter engagement, there's 2 heads, one's male, one's female. So they are promoting more women from within and giving them more senior or leadership roles. I think I'd just like to congratulate Christine, because doing what you did and achieving what you did for your club is something to be really proud of, and your part in that.
Thank you.
I joined the Supporters Trust because I wanted to make a difference for football supporters, just supporters, full stop. It's interesting, the more I've got into football over the years, the more I've come across things that I just think, oh my God, this is awful. This is really diabolical. I think Tracy Crouch's fan-led review, I think the issues around governance, I think that will be really important to see all that brought in. But women leaders, more's needed. Like I said, I think what would be good to see is clubs actually reflect on how many women there are, what their roles are, how much responsibility they have, how do they support their female supporters, how do they work with them, how do they acknowledge, what do they do around female equality and female rights and safety and security. So one of the things we had to push for was safe drop-offs. So, Hannah, I know you've been to the London Stadium. If you get back from, say, Newcastle away, and it's about 2 or 3 in the morning, there's nothing around the London Stadium. There's no lights, there's no anything, it's not safe. So we push for safe drop-off points for women. Well, obviously everybody can value, but it's about making sure that the clubs should be looking at those sort of things as well, I think.
Making those changes. We actually have done a whole one of these episodes about safety in the game as well. So I'm urging people to go and find that episode as well. Hannah, from your point of view, you were a regular goer to football in the 90s. You like to go and watch Coventry. You've now toured a show talking about it. You've had a play all about football. For you, why is it important for fans to have female leaders, and where do you think there's a real absence of them?
Yeah, obviously my experience is slightly different. And again, I just echo what Sue said in listening to Christine's story. It's just amazing what you've achieved and really, really inspiring to see how you took charge in that way. For me, I was a teenager in the 90s when I was going to Coventry. I've lived abroad, lived in lots of different places. So although I still watch Coventry now, I didn't continue going all the time in the way that it sounds like Christine and Sue did. And I've been to lots of different clubs. But I suppose it's kind of similar that when I wrote my play, I didn't set out with like some grand expectations for it. I wanted to kind of express my experience and see how that might resonate. But it has been really successful. And through that, I have been asked to be on quite a lot of programs and podcasts and things. So in a way, I suppose that is a kind of leadership in a different sense, because I'm not a business person. I'm not on the side of business. But I think it can only be a positive hearing women, and also women of colour, having more voices. But I agree with Sue. I think it starts right at the bottom. And something, I went to the Coventry game at Millwall the other day away, which was my first time at the Den, and they had free sanitary products in the toilets. And it's just those little things that I think start to show that it's not just, oh, we tolerate women being here. It's actually integrating. And I think, as with everything, it starts at the bottom and moves up. But it is true that in leading positions, it is still mainly white men. And you do notice that. And I think it's just because people will normally want to be around other people who are like them, because it means that they don't have to change, they don't have to modify their behaviour or be worrying about what they're going to say. But I have noticed on documentaries, I love to watch football documentaries, that you do see women in and around the team, whether that's physiotherapists. I know that there isn't that many female medics, and I think there has been some instances with that, with women going on the pitch and they've sort of got sexist comments. But I think it's just a slow process that is moving in the right direction, and that it will take time, and hopefully we'll start to see more women right at the top making those big decisions.
How do you see those women coming through, Christine and Sue? You managed to do it, but I think if you haven't got the women in those places where they are part of the decision-making process, then we're light years away. I mean, what you achieved, Christine, was fantastic, but it is unusual. And I wouldn't want to be sat here speaking to you thinking that we're not going to have, I don't know, 30%, 40% representation on boards across the EFL, Premier League. But how far away are we from that?
I think it's difficult to put a figure on it, or a timeline, if you like, because what I worry about, and what I hear particularly men saying, is that it's a token woman, and that's really insulting. But we need to be to a place where women are accepted because they are the best person to do whatever it is, whether it be on the EFL board or running a football club or chairing a supporters trust. So it's really, I want to appeal to women, because we've got to take some responsibility for this ourselves. I mean, again, I was talking to you all before we started recording. It was my mum that got me into football. My mum went to the famous Blackpool 53 Cup final on the back of her brother's motorbike. My mum was a very unusual lady. She was born in 1927, and yet she did things that women didn't really do in those days. So I suppose, I've kind of followed through from that. So we need more women to realise that, we don't have to put up with the bullying, which is what discrimination, whether it be sexual discrimination or racial discrimination or whatever, it is a form of bullying, and we have to push back against it. The laws are in place to support women for equality, so we need to seize the day and just refuse to be intimidated. I do not expect to be discriminated against when I go anywhere or do anything. I don't look for it, and I certainly won't accept it if it happens. And I think if you have that inner core of confidence and that determination, that comes across. And I think you'll find that a lot of men who perhaps have been the ones that have done the bullying will go, whoa, and they won't take you on. Bullies are cowards, let's be honest. Mm-hmm. So, girls have to do it for themselves as well. And I think that's where we're at now. We need to push forward.
Yeah, I agree with Christine. I think it is how you present yourself as well. And I've really noticed that as I've gotten older and after making my play, I don't feel quite so nervous when I go to games. I tend to just because of other things I do in my life, I'm not afraid to occupy that space. And you do find that people's reactions to you can be different. And I think it would be great to see more women and women of colour elected onto, say, the FA Council. So not just on the club level, but actual governing bodies that supposedly are kind of impartial, or I don't know if that's the right word, but I think it would be great to see more of that, because then hopefully that might filter down to club level as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like role models to inspire people. And, you know, Christine, you said it a couple of times, it has to be the right person for the job. So what you don't want is a female role model that's not exactly the right sort of role model, that gives a real bad example. I mean, you know, I'm another person. I've been round the block so many times. People try it on, they only ever try it on with me once, and they get a bit of what's called East End tongue. I just don't accept it because it's not okay. You know, I've even called Karen Brady out on it. You know, on how she talks, because sometimes it's not okay. It's just not okay. And I mean, female leaders. I just want to kind of just mention one that I think really deserves to be mentioned, and that's the Lionesses manager.
Serena Wiegman.
And who she took over from, because I heard, I was talking to a couple of friends of mine, female friends, and our kind of view is that she manages to win as opposed to managing to not lose or draw. That's not the same thing. She has such a good attitude, and she's a little bit, maybe, I can imagine her being like me and Christine. She don't take no truck from anybody. You know, she just won't have it. And that's how you have to be. You don't have to be rude to people or offensive. You just have to say, no, that is not acceptable. I will not be spoken to like that.
I want to get all of your thoughts as well on what I call it's a real juxtaposition. So let's start with the boardrooms. The fact that Premier League teams are in the spotlight, I think, means that the progression of women onto board level could be seen as easier than in the what I would deem sometimes archaic lower level EFL clubs, whereby it's a bit more of a boys' club, a bit more difficult and protected, not so much highlighted in the media. But then you switch that around and you look at the leaders on the pitch. I think it'd be a lot easier, and even though it hasn't happened yet, to get a woman in a leadership role in the lower levels to become a manager than it would in the Premier League. So why does that happen? Why have we got that juxtaposition where there's equal decision making to be done, some of it on the pitch, some of it off the pitch, and you think at the highest level it might be easier to do it behind the scenes than it is on the pitch?
Potentially, the issue in the Premier League and the boardroom is when you look, because the Premier League clubs, whatever, I mean, we are the emotional owners, but to the owners, they are businesses. So if you're working for a business, so long as you've got a business capacity and a business brain, getting back to the best person for the job, then I can see how more women could potentially just do the job, because it's about making money, basically, and selling your product and merchandise and promoting the club, whatever your club is. So that, I think, might be one of the reasons why. As far as being the Premier League team and, say, the manager, I think this gets back to the point that Hannah made about the boys' club. And maybe there's a fear factor, anxiety factor from the Premier League owners, which is a boys' club. I mean, I think when the Premier League teams meet, Karen Brady actually is the only woman in the room. I can see her bossing the room, knowing what she's like, but I believe she's the only woman in the room of 20. But I think there's a fear/anxiety. How will our supporters perceive it? We've got some woman bossing this lot around, and what is a woman doing in the man's game, and all this sort of nonsense that we've all heard over the years. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's what's part of the factors.
Yeah, I think, again, you know, people won't change the way they do things really until they're pressured into it. And, you know, in the Premier League, you've got clubs that are perhaps under the microscope a bit more. some of the lower league clubs really are still bastions of male dominance. So I think, and I know, sort of talking to colleagues of mine from lower league clubs who are, on supporters trust boards and whatnot, they do find that the ladies do find it quite a battle, and it's hardened attitudes that have to be changed. But as we keep saying, it will have to come, and the more there is pressure put on, and the more we shine a light on what's going on, the more things will have to change. We've seen it with racism, we've seen it with homophobia, so it needs to happen with sexual discrimination like this as well.
It does feel, Hannah, from a diversity point of view, when you look at leadership, that is light years away. You look at on the pitch and the struggles that we have in getting diverse leaders, and that's in the men's game. So to then add the women factor onto that, does it feel a bit overwhelming?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's, if we look at the number of kind of non-white managers in the men's game, I've always found that to be quite a shocking. I don't know what the exact statistic is, but there really aren't many. And I know that there's a lot of work being done towards that now, with trying to get more people from diverse backgrounds doing their coaching badges. And I know that the Premier League, going on to the players, have currently got a drive for recruiting South Asian players, because this is something, I'm mixed race, as I said, I'm half South Asian and half white British. And I'm quite shocked that from the 90s, when I first started going, to now, there hasn't been a greater increase in South Asian players, both men and women. So it's good to see that kind of being addressed. But I think it sort of goes back to what Sue was saying, that in the Premier League, where it is more in the spotlight, they need to be seen to be doing the right thing. It's kind of, we can have the business women in the boardrooms, but I just think that having a woman on the touchline, I just can't see people accepting that, to be honest with you. Like, I just couldn't really imagine that myself, not because I don't want to, but just because I couldn't imagine like a female coach heading up West Ham or Liverpool. And I wish I could imagine that, because, why couldn't that work?
Christine has won other battles, Hannah. Maybe she can tell us.
Yeah.
Well, we used to say there wouldn't be any female officials, but there are, and it's happening. Again, it's got to come. You've got to start right at the beginning, and for women to have the confidence and to have the experience and the expertise to manage football teams, they've got to really have a playing career, I would suggest, and then do all the badges and the coaching. So it's going to take a while, because the women's game is so far behind because it was banned and all of this. So unfortunately, you can't just make up for 50 lost years or whatever it is. So again, it's going to take time. It's going to take an awful lot of commitment. But one other thing that that's come into my head as well that I think puts women off is that women are still very much judged on how they look. And this was actually mentioned, on the workshop that we had at the FSA AGM in July. And I was quite sad listening to a lady who wanted to speak publicly, but was criticised and felt really sort of quite down on herself because people were criticising the way she looked. And I mean, I think at the time I actually quipped about, when you've done a few interviews on Blackpool Promenade in a 4th 10 gale, you really stop worrying about what you look like. I'm not saying that you should turn up looking like you slept in a bin, and certainly not. But it's wrong that women are under this kind of pressure of, are you too fat? Are you too thin? What's your hair like? Have you got lipstick on? Whatever. It's absolutely ridiculous to judge people like that. But women very much more, I think, than men are under that pressure. So that's something else that we need to dismiss it and say we're not having this, because it's
that was something that I did want to mention as well, but I don't want it to, like, it's not any shade on the people who are on TV, but one thing I have noticed is that the majority of female pundits and people on the pitch or doing the interviews, they are always really kind of super dolled up. And, if that's their choice, they want to be dressed like that, of course. But I have wondered that myself. And I think it is, obviously the men do all wear suits and they are smart. But I think that a lot of the women you see on TV talking about football, they are very attractive. So I think that is something that is sort of there in the background.
Let's bring this fully focused back to the leadership angle. Any other solutions? And that can be boardroom level. So if you've got any solutions that you can share with us that you think could help solve this, or looking at leadership on the pitch. I know, Christine, you've already mentioned a couple there that I thought were really good pertinent points.
Yeah, so I think let's go on the pitch first of all. I think this is going to take, we've all said it, it's going to take time. We've got to keep pushing. I think we've got to accept that it will be a longish journey, I think. But there needs to be more women that are prepared to make the transition from their playing career onto either to managing, get their manager badges, go for it. I think then the Premier League clubs need to look seriously at, even if they have an assistant manager, assistant coach, let's start there. Let's not say manager, the top job, so not David Moyes, but one of his team. Can one of his team be a female and he coach her on and she learn from all the people around her? You know, I can't really see any reason why the Premier League clubs couldn't do that, because they have coaching teams. So let's have a woman as part of the men's team. And that's somewhere to start. So it eases the supporters in. It gives a role model. It eases her in, gives her the experience. I think that's a big win. I think that's a big statement for any Premier League club or any club to make, to bring that woman in. So that would be one of the things I would like to see happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, starting with particularly with the girls' game and the way it's being developed, I have two great nieces who are 8 and 12. They're both in football teams, and the quality of the coaching they're receiving is really excellent. I was actually quite surprised at how good it was when I've been to watch them, and I think as they get used to obviously it's all male, or it's mainly males that are training them at the moment. But I think as you get more dads taking the girls to games and things like this, and you start mixing the male and the female together, so that it isn't this separation of dads taking the lads and, you know, girls going shopping with the mum, and we move away from this. It develops the confidence in girls and for boys to get used to girls being around, because I think that's the thing. And then, like Sue's idea is absolutely brilliant, I think. So as girls gain experience in the technical side of football and start to develop their own skills, it won't be seen as being strange for them to then get involved in either the women's game or the men's game.
It could do with there being an official pathway, though, couldn't it? Otherwise, it could get ignored. It needs people like you, Christine, people like you, Sue, to bang that drum a little bit about having an area which is linked maybe to the technical side of the courses where women can get placed. I think maybe that's how it joins up somewhere. Hannah, I'm going to leave the final word to you. You've been a football fan all your life. I know that you've lived in all different parts of the countries. What is it that you'd like to see for the second part of your life when it comes to leaders in football?
Yeah, I think just what's been touched upon, women who've had playing careers, I'd like to see more diverse women playing the women's game, because I think that is something that we can't kind of ignore. As great and as amazing it is just to see the women's game developing. So women who've had playing careers going on to do their coaching badges. I'd love to see more women being elected onto the FA Council and having a say in those important conversations. And then just women kind of coming through at board level, so that Karen Brady isn't the only one out of 20 kind of clubs to have a woman there.
We'll leave that discussion there for now, but thank you very much to Sue, Hannah and Christine for sharing those experiences and tips with us as well. If you've been listening at home and want to share your views, do comment below. You can get in touch on social media at We Are The FSA. Keep a lookout for the other Listening Project episodes too that cover a wide range of topics, including safety at matches and whether women feel their voices are being heard. There's one episode released every week for 6 weeks. Thank you for listening to this one. See you soon.